Okay, so you probably think you already know this story. A boy with a severe facial condition, a wild biker mom, and a tear-jerking Hollywood movie that made everyone cry. Mask, Cher and leather, the whole thing. But what if that version only told half the truth? What if the real story, the one behind the cameras, was messier, stranger, and a lot harder to process? Because before the movie, before the fame, there was a real boy. Roy Lee "Rocky" Dennis was born in 1961 in California. At first, nothing seemed too unusual. He was a sickly kid, sure. Ear infections, sinus problems. But then, during a routine medical check, something didn't look right. And that's when everything changed. What doctors found would alter the course of his life forever. But how bad was it really? After months of testing, the diagnosis came back, a condition so rare that only a handful of cases had ever been recorded. It caused the bones in his skull to thicken and grow, slowly distorting his face and putting pressure on his brain. Doctors didn't sugarcoat it. They told his mother he would likely lose his sight, struggle mentally, and not live past the age of 7. 7. That was the timeline. But here's the part nobody expected. His mother didn't accept that. Not even close. Florence "Rusty" Tullis was not your typical parent. She didn't break down. She didn't retreat. Instead, she pushed back against doctors, schools, and anyone who tried to limit her son. She insisted he be treated like any other kid. And somehow, Rocky rose to meet that expectation. He went to school. He made friends. He even tutored classmates. So how did a child given 7 years manage to keep going far beyond that? To understand that, you have to understand Rusty. And the truth is, she was nothing like the polished version you saw on screen. She grew up tough, dropped out of school young, ran with biker gangs, and lived fast. By the time Rocky was diagnosed, she already believed something unusual, that people could will themselves into wellness. It sounds empowering. But it also raises a question. What happens when belief meets reality? She raised Rocky with that mindset. Every time he felt pain, every time things got worse, she pushed him to fight it mentally. And in many ways, it worked. Rocky developed a personality that was warm, funny, and incredibly resilient. People loved him. But there was always a shadow behind that philosophy. Was it strength? Or was it denial? Her world wasn't conventional either. She was part of a real biker community, not a movie version. These were rough people, loyal and blunt, and they embraced Rocky as one of their own. He grew up surrounded by that energy, that kind of love. But there were other parts of Rusty's life the film softened, or avoided completely. And that's where things start to get complicated. When the movie was released in 1985, it became a success. Millions of dollars at the box office. But Rusty herself only received a small payment for the rights to the story. Most of that money, by the way, went to help her other son, who was seriously ill at the time. So was this really a Hollywood success story? Or something else entirely? What's even more interesting is how Rusty reacted to the film. She didn't call it a tribute. She didn't even call it accurate. She called it a fairy tale. Not because it was bad, but because it wasn't the full truth. She appreciated Cher's performance, even praised it. But she hadn't expected the story to focus so much on her. She thought it would be about Rocky. Instead, it turned her into a central figure. And that didn't sit quite right. There were other changes too. Timelines were compressed. Key parts of their life were simplified. Even people were left out entirely. But one detail really bothered her. The music. Rocky had loved a certain artist, and the film originally planned to reflect that. But due to behind-the-scenes issues, it was changed. And according to Rusty, it didn't feel like her son anymore. Small detail? Maybe. But sometimes, small details carry the most truth. And then there's the hardest part of the story. The part most people never question. The night Rocky died. By that time, he had already outlived every expectation. He was 16. His condition had worsened, and the pain had become constant. One night, after going out with family, he came home with a headache. Rusty did what she had always done. She told him to rest, to fight it, to make himself well. But this time, he didn't wake up. Now here's where things get unclear. Some accounts say she found him herself. Others suggest she wasn't even home at the time. The truth is, the details aren't perfectly agreed upon. And maybe that's the point. Because real life doesn't always give you a clean, cinematic ending. It leaves questions behind. And maybe the biggest missing piece in the movie wasn't a scene, but a person. Rusty's other son, Joshua, was completely left out of the film. He was a major part of her life. He was also facing a serious illness during the same period. In fact, the money from the film helped pay for his treatment. Think about that for a second. She sold one son's story to try and save another. How do you even begin to process that? After losing Rocky, and later Joshua, Rusty's life changed again. She moved, found a quieter path, and began helping others. People struggling with addiction. People facing illness. She never stopped being who she was, but she shifted her focus. Still strong. Still stubborn. Still convinced that belief mattered. Years later, she was in a serious motorcycle accident. She survived the crash, but complications followed. And eventually, she passed away. Even at the end, she didn't speak about death the way most people do. She saw it as just another place to go. Not an ending. Just a transition. But was that strength, or something else entirely? When you strip away the movie, the myth, and the polished storytelling, what you're left with is something much harder to define. A boy who refused to see himself as broken. A mother who refused to accept limits. And a story that doesn't fit neatly into inspiration or tragedy. It's both. And neither. So what does it all mean? Maybe that real life isn't meant to be clean or simple. Maybe it's meant to be complicated. And maybe that's why this story still sticks with people. Not because it's perfect, but because it isn't.